Hello once again, and welcome to another edition of the SaskAgToday.com Roundtable. I'm joined by the Chief Agricultural Editor of SaskAgToday.com, Kevin Hirsch, as well as the 620 CKRM Regina Agri-News Director, Ryan Young. I'm GX94 Yorkton Agriculture Director, Doug Falconer. And first of all, this week, I guess we heard during the course of the week that we had a fair bit of snow in some parts of Saskatchewan in March, and it seemed to tail over into April this past week, Ryan.
Yeah, that's right. Over here in Regina, we've had on again, off again snow over the last couple of weeks, I would say. And this last snowfall, I'd say we probably had around a centimeter, give or take. It wasn't that much, but it didn't take long for it to melt and go back to kind of a spring slash fall kind of an aesthetic. So you wouldn't know that it would have snowed the other day. So we didn't really get much. But I do understand, Doug, in Yorkton, you guys are still basically in winter mode.
Yeah, we still have a lot of snow on the ground here. We did have a storm roll through a couple of days ago where he started out with freezing rain overnight, and then it switched to snow, but not a whole lot of snow. And in fact, by the evening of that day, it was all gone. So we were all right. I understand Sturgis Priestville, which is about an hour north of Yorkton, they had quite a bit of snow, and there were reports of 37 centimeters in Meadow Lake. It sounded like Meadow Lake, Prince Albert, Nipawin, Melfort got hit pretty hard. Is that what you're hearing as well, Kevin?
Yeah, it seems like that's where the storm went. I know my wife was still in Saskatoon on her way down to the farm. I was at the farm, and we just had a skiff of snow here at Keebree, northwest of Swift Current. But my wife had lots of shoveling to do before she came down to the farm. So we're and you spent some time at your home area of Glentworth, and I think they're even drier than here. We're still tacky on top here. There's no field activity yet, but it wouldn't be too far in coming if we actually got a dry, warm spell. But it's been cool up until now. I think there's going to be the way things are shaping up, there's going to be areas in the south going a long time ahead with their seeding operations as compared to some of the central and northern areas.
Something that was announced last week, but kind of made news again this week, was the fact that the advance payments programs, they increased the limits for the interest-free portion on a number of crops, and it seemed to catch the Canadian Canola Growers Association, who administers the program, by surprise. Ryan, you had a chance to speak with Mr. Gallant on that.
Yeah, I talked to Dave Gallant about that just to get his thoughts on it, and he noted that it was the sixth time in the last 8 years that the federal government has changed the interest-free portion of the federal loan, and obviously it's something that the Canola Growers Association would like to keep consistent, whether that's at the legislated $100,000 every year or whichever amount the federal government decides to change it, which in this current time is $250,000 for more than 50 eligible commodities under the program. Those advocacy efforts are still ongoing. Again, he said that they would like to see the number consistent and stay there. And they were told right after they issued about $335 million worth of cash advances to farmers across Western Canada, where the area in which they cover about 1,740 farmers to be exact. So, something that we would all like to see, a little bit more consistency rather than announcing the program open at this amount and then the next day or the next week a different amount.
Kevin, I think the CCGA was right to be a little annoyed by the fact that the change came so late.
I think so, and it's happened again and again and again. And they're one of the administrators. Another one is called Farm Cash out of Alberta. But it's sort of like having to do the application twice. You do it once, and with the $100,000 limit, and then a lot of those people are going to turn around and say, well, I want to increase that. So it's sort of doubling the workload, and they'll probably only get paid for it one time rather than two times. The administration fee is $400 or $500 per application, depending upon which provider you go with. But I think that's a valid point. I think everybody would welcome a $250,000 tax-free limit on the cash advance program. But if that's what it's going to be year in and year out, announce it well in advance so the administration and producers don't have to go back and redo all the work again.
All right. And of course, also this week, Ryan, you had a chance to speak with Brenna Grant from CanFax regarding cattle prices. And I guess she had some good thoughts on where things are going with cattle prices into the future.
Yeah, she gave me an idea on where cattle prices are through the first quarter of 2026. Just pulling up some of the numbers here that she quoted me. She noted that prices have increased year over year. In Saskatchewan specifically, she said a 550-pound steer calf is around $7 a pound. Bulls are around $2.50 a pound, and D2 cows are at $2.40 a pound. And cattle weighing 850 pounds are right around $4.80 a pound, coming off a high point in February of $5 a pound. So all of those, again, increases from the previous year. And we know that prices have been on the high end for the last probably, say, 4 years since the drought of 2021, she said. So obviously a lot of on the supply and demand kind of side of things. The Canadian cattle herd still kind of on the lower end of things. The U.S. is kind of dealing with their own short of herd issues, so to speak, and Mexico has its issues as well. Not necessarily with the herd, but more disease and that aspect of it. And demand is still very high for beef. It doesn't seem like people are, too shy or too afraid of paying top dollar for Canadian beef or any kind of beef products for that matter. So those two things, and then coupled with the fact that some feed and weather conditions. If we don't have good weather conditions, the feed doesn't increase. So that can cause a ripple effect there. So all of those things kind of combine to, increase these beef prices across the whole spectrum.
Kevin, your thoughts on cattle and beef prices as we head into towards the second half of the year?
Well, it's a great time for cattle producers. Some have been into calving season for a while. Some are soon to be into calving season, so a busy time of year. And I would think that if we get a year with good moisture and good forage supply this year, with the current prices we're seeing, then you will see an enhanced expansion of the beef breeding herd in Western Canada. If the forage supply is there and there's more certainty with prices and it looks good going forward, I think you're going to see more producers with the cash flow and the courage to actually expand the beef breeding herd. So a very interesting time for the beef industry, and it's never been a better time probably for cow-calf producers. And by the same token, the grain industry now is facing some headwinds and some worrisome prices, so they've gone in opposite directions.
All right. And of course, Kevin, you also provided us with a story this week about the farmland market in Saskatchewan. You spoke with Tim Hammond of Hammond Realty, and he had some interesting comments about, when it comes to land prices and the quality of the land and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's Tim Hammond of Hammond Realty's view that good quality farmland, he's seeing the price holding, maybe still increasing. We've become used to seeing land prices increasing across the board, but he's also seeing where average land or poor quality land is barely holding its own for prices and maybe in some cases slipping a little bit. So this is the first indication perhaps of a softening land market as people look towards poor grain prices and high input costs. One other thing that he thought was interesting is that he's got more interest now in some producers selling 2 or 3/4 of land, and especially if they can sell it to an investor and lease that land back, just a way for them to restructure their operation, get their debt load under control. Of course, we see Manette Farms was had a lot of land on the market, and you have to think that there are some other producers out there that are in a similar situation, would like to get their balance sheet in better shape. But Tim Hammond hasn't seen this kind of a trend since the early 2000s. And it's, again, a sign of some financial stress where producers want to get their balance sheet in order.
Also this week, there are 7 Peavey Mart locations that had their grand openings across Alberta and Saskatchewan, 5 in Alberta. They're in Lacombe, Spruce Grove, Camrose, Westlock, and Red Deer. And as for Saskatchewan, the 2 new stores were in Assiniboia, and Yorkton. And I had a chance to go to the grand opening yesterday here in Yorkton for the Peavey Mart store. I had a chance to talk to the store manager. He was very excited. In fact, he said that Yorkton was leading the way in sales. They've all been open for about 2 weeks now. They had a soft opening about 2 weeks ago, and grand openings just on Thursday. I guess some good news out there for farmers. A lot of guys were missing Peavey Mart and the product line they carry, Kevin.
Interesting that, Yorkton is a great hinterland, a great trading area. Assiniboia they must look at that on the map and say that's a great location too. Maybe fewer options or a further drive for a lot of people to get some of the things that they would otherwise get at Peavey Mart. But I think people in other parts of the province are going to be a little bit envious of the Yorkton and Assiniboia areas for having a Peavey Mart come back, and people will be watching and hoping for announcements of further openings if this Peavey Mart reconstitution is successful.
Also this week, we heard that the Agri-Arm research stations in Saskatchewan have been involved with a special, a test regarding pulse crops and plant growth regulators. Last year was the first year, and 2026 will be the second year. Kevin, plant growth regulators, how do they work?
Well, in cases where you get a really good crop, you might, for instance, get lodging, crop going down, and that actually limits yield, even though the crop was very strong. So people have used plant growth regulators, but the wonder about is how effective they are. Are they useful on other crops as well? So IHARF, as well as a number of the other Agri-Arm sites, are testing that. And I don't really like this kind of research because it's not just subjective or what people think. It's actually a measurement. So they're doing a lot of good work. Something else producers maybe want to check out is that a lot of on-farm research has been done under the guidance of Agri-Arm sites and others with actual protocols, both by Sask Pulse and Sask Wheat and some of the other commodity commissions. And that work is being published, looking at a lot of things that are really of key interest, key questions that producers are asking, everything from nitrogen rates to seeding rates and testing what actually is optimum. So if you get a chance touring around the internet to look at the on-farm research results, I think that's a great program. And producers with modern equipment where they can put one product on one pass and not on the next pass, and all GPSed, and then it can be way-wagoned later to do actual yield determinations. I think that when the protocols are firmly established like that, you end up with some results that are meaningful.
Also this week on Thursday, the Saskatchewan government announced an expansion of the limited time strychnine use in the province. Ryan, that was a story you jumped on.
Yeah, that's right. I was actually kind of surprised with how quick things were updated. I thought, considering the movement of governments on all levels, that it might take a little while before we got the expansion, but nonetheless, we did. And, kind of looking at a map, it kind of covers the northwest part of the province, stretches all the way down to the southwest, goes right across the south to the southeast, and a little bit into the east central region, actually. And so there's only a handful of crop districts in the central part and northeastern part that are not eligible for strychnine use to control the gopher population, or Richardson ground squirrels, as they're also referred to. So again, I thought that was kind of a quick adjustment there from the governments. And I spoke to Kevin this morning about it with his thoughts on the whole announcement. And Kevin, why don't you share those views?
Well, I just hope that the governments, in concert with rural municipalities, can move as quickly in actually getting strychnine available to producers with what's supposed to be enhanced training requirements. I just worry that it's going to take some time before that product is going to be available. And I really recommend that this is the time that gophers should be controlled. If you're seeing gophers, the snow might be barely gone and you're seeing gophers, that's the best time to control them early in the spring. I wouldn't wait for strychnine, and I'm not waiting for strychnine. It's right on my agenda to do right now is go out and get zinc phosphide based oat burrow bait down in the holes as much as possible. It's a labor time time-consuming operation, but now is the time when you can get best results. If strychnine becomes available in a timely manner later, and you want to use that, go ahead. Hopefully it will be available, but I wouldn't miss this early window opportunity, because this is the time when any product is going to have its best results.
All right, and finally on today's roundtable, it sounds like the ceasefire between Israel's, the United States, and Iran is on for now, but it's kind of shaky at times, and it's of course still affecting fuel prices because of the Strait of Hormuz. Sometimes you hear it's open, sometimes you hear it's not. It's not really a lot of ships going through there in a fluid motion. It sounds like it's pretty herky-jerky. Is that what you're hearing, Kevin?
Yeah, it seems like when the news is positive as far as the strait opening and the ceasefire holding, grain prices drop. When there's a setback, grain prices start to appreciate again. I think we might be watching this for quite some time before we know exactly what the situation is going to be. But if you listen to all the forecasts for fertilizer, they are pretty dire as far as fertilizer supply and countries stopping exports to hold on to their own product. There's nothing that's going to be good for fertilizer prices for quite some time, and some analysts believe that the usual reset in fertilizer prices, particularly nitrogen prices, might not occur this summer. We might not get a buying opportunity this summer that looks a whole lot better than the ugly prices we're seeing right now. But the whole ag industry is watching the situation in the Middle East. It's going to be very important to how the year unfolds.
Well, that's going to do it for this week's edition of the SaskAgToday.com Roundtable. On behalf of 620 CKRM Regina Agri-News Director Ryan Young and the Chief Agricultural Editor for SaskAgToday.com, Kevin Hirsch, I'm GX94 Yorkton Agriculture Director Doug Falconer saying so long until next time.